What's up everyone, welcome and welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Komaris, and for today's video I'm going to be giving my thoughts on Them Season 2 The Scare. Initially I was encouraged to watch Them because I expressed my interest on TikTok in Lovecraft Country, but it didn't really meet my expectations. I was expecting it to be not as fictional and, sci-fi as it was. I wasn't expecting all the magic and all the supernatural activity and things like that. Well, to an extent, I was expecting supernatural activity, like maybe like some voodoo or, any other sources of magic, but not to the point to where like these people have monsters coming at them with 50,000 eyes, which was creeping me out and making me itch because of trypophobia. And also, like, yeah, just all of those things. I wasn't really expecting that, but it was still a good show with a very good plot, and it didn't feel dragged out. I was expecting more of, Topsy and Bopsy, as I expressed in the last video. If you haven't watched the video, I highly encourage you to watch that before watching this one. And yeah, so back to Them Season 2. Season 2 was very much a breath of fresh air as compared to the first season. The first season, as I expressed in the last video, was it was based in the 1950s, so you can do the math on that. It was very racist and it was very triggering because, like, especially during the times that we are in now and where I live and all the things going on now. Just thinking about those things happening back then that isn't really documented or taught to us. And with this show also being fiction, because it's so realistic, like, you can't really help but to think like these things were actually happening back then, but it's not documented. And this is just imagination, but this could possibly have happened, but we have no proof to show that this is happening. But yeah, anywho, season 2 was a breath of fresh air, although it was still based during like a very racist time where racism was not hidden at all. The late 80s going on to the early 90s. During this time, police brutality became a very prevalent issue that was being fought against, as you can think about NWA and their song F the Police. And the season has a lead. Her name is Detective Reeves, and she's a black woman that is a detective in California. And her co-workers, specifically Detective McKinney, is very racist, and he is trying to do everything he can to not trust her and her intuition and her beliefs. Throughout the entire show, Detective Reeves is basically fighting to be heard within the whole police station. Nobody is trusting in her. Nobody is believing in her vision and the fact that she knows that there's a serial killer out there. And the only problem is that, well, not the only problem. One problem is that she can't prove it. And the second problem is that she's black. And Mr. McKinney, not Mr. Detective McKinney is, again, very racist and misogynistic. And he's trying to do all he can to make sure that she doesn't uncover anything. And throughout the show, like, I was beginning to think, is McKinney the person that's doing these things? Because he started to do things like pick up her son, Kel Reeves, and her son was smoking weed, and he picked her son up, and he goes through like his bag and stuff, and he finds the weed, and he basically tells him to get in the car without verbally saying it. He just opens the back seat and tells him to get in. And he gets in and he drives around, and then he takes him to, he thinks he's going to jail, but he just drops him off at their house. He had no right to be picking up that lady's son when they've already had issues in the beginning and they don't get along. But for some reason, he still went against her permission and did that to taunt her. And even before that, they got into it. Like, they were the only two people in the station that night. And he got so awkward, like he was really, I believe he was drunk or something, but he just kept trying to throw himself onto her. I'm gonna let this train go by. But he just kept trying to throw himself onto her, and she was getting very uncomfortable to the point to where she almost shot him. But thankfully, that didn't happen. So, yeah. Throughout this entire show, she's basically trying to fight to figure out who is doing this killing. And because of the description where the kids were like, it's a red-haired man and things like that, I was beginning to really think that it was McKinney because his hair's not fire red, but I believe his hair was kind of like ginger in a way, the little bit of hair that he did have. Things just kept getting weird and weird with the cases. And as she went to the other cases, the more cases, more things were uncovered about the killer and how the killer was getting to them. And as time passed on, you got to realize that this isn't just a person doing the killing. This is somebody with some kind of like powers because they're reaching them in a supernatural way. And when she chased after the guy, let me find his name. Yeah, while she was on the first scene, she ended up getting, attacked by other black people that were on the scene, calling her a pig, this and that. And she was just asking them for like, do y'all know anything about this lady that has been killed? And none of them would talk to her. They were just calling her a pig and things of that nature because she's a black woman that's a police officer. And, black people are against, especially during that time, police officers because they feel like they all were out to get them. And she immediately locks eyes with this one guy that's just carrying a bag of groceries, and he's just looking at her, and then he's just shaking his head like, y'all all are gonna die, this and that. And as he runs off, he drops the bag of groceries and just takes off from her when she was just trying to get him to talk to her. So she hunts him down, and she ends up following him all the way to his house, and he's there standing with the baby, saying that he just left the house to go get the info for his baby and things like that. But he was there feeding the baby with the bottle and things like that. But I'm like, you went to go get food or an info for the baby, but you dropped that bag a long time ago with everything in it. So how are you feeding the baby something that you left on the ground? Like, so that was the first thing that was kind of like off with him. And then McKinney ended up following her there, and he got really aggressive, and he started to he pointed his gun at him while he had the baby in his hand. And she was like, stop, he has a kid. She was telling him he had a kid before he even came around the corner, but he was still aiming the gun at him. And he gave him a chance to put the baby down, I believe, or the baby was handed to Detective Reeves. And he ended up basically beating the boy, asking him where's the drugs, this and that, basically racially profiling him before even getting to talk to him like at all. He just immediately went to beating on the boy. And the boy seemed to be very, very scared already by something, because he was seeing the serial killer, which is the red-haired man that reveals himself closer to the end of the show. And he was saying how he was scared of him and how the only reason why he left his house was to get food for the baby, which I'm not sure, again, how he managed to get that for the baby, because you dropped it. You dropped the bag. And Detective McKinney was basically making him go through and ransack his whole room, his drawers, flip over his bed, the mattress and everything to find the drugs. And he couldn't find anything because there were no drugs. Or so we thought. McKinney starts to see, like, why do you have the windows covered up? And why do you have the mirror covered up? And the boy started to panic, and he started to basically, like, not attack Reeves, but he was just trying to get him not to uncover that mirror or those windows at all. And that's because the windows and the mirrors were portals for the red-haired man to get to them. Within every case, it started to become evident that that was the portal for how the red-haired man would get to these people. McKinney wasn't trying to hear him out. He was just immediately went on to pistol whipping him and attacking him and brutalizing him. Time went on, and next thing you know, the boy actually did sell drugs, and he had them hidden within a hidden compartment on the floor. Well, beneath the floor. And after that, while he was getting ready to, mix up, he heard police basically banging on his door. So he went to throw everything away, put it in the toilet and everything like that. He hid his child in the room, and by the time he went back to his room, he had heard them bust through the door. And once they bust through the door, he just gave up and surrendered. So he sat on the floor with his hands above his head, on his knees, waiting for them to just come around the corner into the room and see him there. But nobody came around. He went around the corner and he went back into the living room, and the door was still closed. But you just heard police kick down your door. So then he hears his child in there giggling like someone's in there playing with him. So he creeps back into the room with his child. The next thing you know, it gets twisted up like a pretzel. And that's one of the things that the red-haired man did very often. He would twist up everybody that he attacked like a pretzel. So that's just a basic how all those killings really went. And I'm just going to talk about how we discovered who the red-haired man was. So the story starts off with a guy named Edmund Gaines. And he's this very geeky, nerdy guy who's very not antisocial, but he seems to really want friends and he wants to get close to people, but it's not really easy for him. And he also works at this place that's very similar to Chuck E. Cheese, just a little arcade, and he dresses up and he uses that to, like, express himself and connect with people, because while he's home alone, he doesn't really connect with anybody. The thing that I really picked up on is while he was also like a starving actor who had never had a role, he was trying his best to become an actor, but nothing was working out in his favor. And he ended up making connects with a lady that worked the desk at the agency to where he would often audition for roles. And she basically gave him an idea like, I have a role that you could probably be good for. And the role was to be a serial killer. Now, in the beginning, I wouldn't have thought that Edmund was going to be the killer because of how he acted like he was just a misunderstood person. I honestly thought Edmund was going to be one of the people that are going to be killed by the killer. And that's the plot twist. He actually was. He was actually one of the first people, I believe, to be killed by the red-haired man. So, Edmund, I should have started off with this, but I'm just talking. I'm just having fun with this. Edmund goes in, he starts to, I believe he was kind of catching feelings. Well, it started to make you think that he was catching feelings for Rhonda, the person who told him that she had a role for him. But I believe that she was just catching feelings for him and he wasn't picking up on the social cues. He just wanted to get closer to her so that he can make sure that he got the role. So he he invited her to dinner at his house, and they basically was just getting along and stuff like that, talking, chatting and things like that. And he started to bring up, like, the role and things like that. And she started talking about how she started mentioning the guy Donovan, the camera operator, who was at basically records the audition tapes for them. And he started to get jealous in a way. He left her at the table and was like, "I'll be back." And she just got up and started walking around the house. And he left to get into the look that he created, that he was going to audition for the serial killer role. And he approaches her with the whole knife in his hand, makeup all over his face, and stockings over his head with overalls. She did not think that he was playing a role. She immediately got scared for her life and thought that he was ready to take her out. And when she got to the point where she was on the verge of tears, that's when he was like, "Oh my God, that was great acting." And he was like, "Did you practice that?" and stuff like that. And she was like, basically shaken up, and she was like, she had to go. And she ended up leaving. Edmund went to go officially audition to the role. He came dressed to the part. He was in character as soon as he walked through the door because he was destined to get that role. And also in that scene, I kind of noticed like he seemed a little bit more buff. But maybe it was just because his arms were probably covered in most of the scenes that I saw beforehand. But he seemed like he was more, bigger. Like he really got into character for that role. And also, I should go back. He was studying Charles Manson, other, serial killers to really embody the serial killer role. Every other thing that he auditioned for, like, were basically stereotypical type of roles that he just didn't fit for because of his personality. Like I said, he was kind of nerdy, introverted, and kind of an odd black guy. Those roles, he couldn't really embody them, which is kind of weird because he embodied the role of a serial killer so well to the point they asked him, well, told him that he had to leave the premises because he was scaring everyone, even the other people that were auditioning for the role as well. He refused to not audition. So he attacked the guy that told him that he couldn't, and he still ended up walking into the room and everybody was telling him to leave. He immediately looked at Rhonda and he was like, "You told me I'll be perfect for this." And he started to have a meltdown and was basically like crying at her. It was like, "You told me I'd be perfect for this." And he ended up having to leave, and he left. But he ended up coming back, and he sat in the parking lot for a very long time, just watching Rhonda and Donovan, the camera operator, interact with each other, and he was very upset. So he ended up breaking into Donovan's apartment, and he started to ransack the entire place. and he found some tapes that he had. I believe the tape was from 1976, and the tape basically showcased Donovan on his 6th birthday celebrating. Just remember that. So he stood outside after he did all that. He watched the tape, and he stood outside and hid around Donovan's apartment. And before he even got a chance to go into the apartment, he snatched Donovan up and attacked him and put him into his car, and he took him to his job, the place that's very similar to Chuck E. Cheese. I wish I knew the name of the place, but I don't. And they were in the basement. Very creepy, very eerie, scary place with all these animatronics that are stripped and tore up and all these broken machines and everything. And he has a projector set up. And on this projector, he has playing Donovan's 6th birthday reel video. And Donovan is tied to the chair, forced to watch it. And after he watches it, he asks Donovan to recite the lines, basically trying to get him to play the part of his 6-year-old self, just as Donovan used to have to sit and record him during audition tapes. He wants him to get into his shoes and feel how it felt to not get a role or be good enough for a role. So when Donovan would recite the lines, he'd be like, no, that's not good enough. And he would basically beat on him and rip him up and break his bones for not getting the lines right. And he ends up throwing Donovan, into his trunk, and he takes him to a desert. And he takes Donovan out of the trunk, and Donovan is a literal pretzel. A pretzel, yeah. And he's crawling, trying to get away from Edmund. And Edmund basically beats him, throws him into an already dug ditch, and covers up his body after he finished off killing him because he begs to stay alive. And now I'm really going through this, I'm just really realizing how unnecessary that was for Edmund to do all of that over a role. And it was just crazy because Edmund had also gotten fired from his job and everything like that. So I guess he felt like he had nothing to lose. And after that, he's very shaken, and he gets a call from Child Protective Services, and they let him know that they have found on record that he has siblings. He grew up in a foster home, and he was raised by white people until they kicked him out because they basically were afraid. They were saying how they were afraid of what that he would do to their daughter. At first, I thought it was just a race issue, but Edmund actually does have problems, as you can tell by how he unnecessarily killed that man over not getting the role. That's when we find out that Edmund is related to Detective Reeves. She showed up to her house, and he brought her a cake and everything, said happy birthday. And she was just wondering, how do you even know it was my birthday? And, who are you? And they were thinking he was a new neighbor around, but he wasn't. And instead of him just saying, I'm your brother, I found out that we're brother and sister, he just wouldn't say it. And that's when Detective Reeves goes into full detective mode, and she's like, who are you? And she's trying to figure out who he is, and he still wouldn't say it. She looks at his ID and everything, and she just doesn't know who he is. Near the ending, we see that these two people are twins. They are twin siblings and they grew up together. But as Athena, the mom, expresses, Edmund had got so out of hand that she could not handle the both of them. But the thing with Athena too is that she's not even the biological mother. She is their foster mother. She adopts Edmund and Detective Reeves. Their biological mother is Ruby Lee from the first season. And she basically gave them up for adoption because she didn't want to pass down the circumstances that she lived in with, the demons that they had attacking them. She felt that just because she gave up her children, she wouldn't have to put them through what she went through by basically just trying to get them to avoid those demons. But as you can see, Edmund grew up with the demons inside of him. And after being denied and put down by Dr. Reeves and put out of her house, he gets really angry. And this starts the whole concept of him becoming infuriated at the fact that she doesn't want to own him. And Edmund then starts to film tapes back to back to back, like basically saying how he felt disrespected and how he sees nothing but blood now that he has left after seeing Detective Reeves, and he's wondering why she doesn't remember the things that they went through during their childhood. Edmund seems to have knowledge on the fact that they were adopted and that they were also like passed down to Athena, their, the mother that adopted them. And they went through a lot before, even getting adopted. Like, they would get put in this box to where, like, he would help her breathe out of with a straw, and they were getting abused before they were adopted and things like that. And Edmund ended up still living with the lady, and the woman that was taking care of them was also his first victim as the red-haired man. But before I get into that, I want to get into how he became the red-haired man. So, this is the part where I am at a loss with this show. I don't really understand where the red-haired man came from. Like, is he just a demon that spawned? Like the top hat man in the last season? Because out of nowhere he popped up during the scene where Edmund had finished recording the tape and he was just in his house, and the police basically found out that he killed Donovan. And all you hear is helicopters and police knocking on his door, literally getting ready to kill him. Well, not kill him, they're getting ready to arrest him, but he probably would have been killed anyway because during that time, yeah. But he ended up sacrificing himself to the red-haired man. He slits his own throat with a knife, and the red-haired man basically consumes him. And this is when I realized that the red-haired man cannot be seen by the human natural eye unless he allows you to. Or just basically selectively. And the SWAT team comes in, the police and all of them come in, and they literally just catch the body and check the pulse and things like that, and they realize that he's dead. And the red-haired man just walks out like he's not there. Nobody's recognizing him and things like that. So he continues to kill more people, and Throughout the show, Reeves is just basically realizing that there are so many people being killed, and she doesn't really get to talk to the victims before they're killed until she gets to Benito. Yeah, Benito is a Latin child raised by his mother, grand I believe that was his grandmother, who has, I don't want to be stereotypical and be like she believes in brujeria. She felt like there were demons inside of him and that he needed an exorcism because he kept saying that he was seeing things and things like that, and it was beginning to scare her to the point to where she didn't want police to talk to him. Soon as they walked up, Detective Reeves and her partner, Detective Diaz, soon as they walked up, she immediately started talking to Detective Diaz in Spanish, and that was one of the things that I wish would have been better uh outlined, or the captions. I watched shows with subtitles, and we didn't get any subtitles basically letting us know like what she was saying. We were just basically left to figure out, like, through context clues, what they were basically talking about, and that made it very hard. I really wanted to understand what they were saying because I don't speak Spanish fluently and things like that. So it would have been great to understand what his grandmother was saying during those times. But while she was talking to Detective Diaz, Detective Reeves was basically getting all the information out of him that he could, and listening to everything that he saw and all the details that he had and things like that. Later that night, he ended up actually um, going through another scene of the red-haired man, and that's when all of his family was at the house to basically perform the exorcism, and nothing was working. So Detective Reeves took it into her hands by grabbing him off the bed and basically rushing him to the hospital because he was having seizures and things like that. And once they got out of the car, um, once she got out of the car, she went to the back and his body was twisted up, which means the red-haired man had got to him. So this is when Detective Reeves realizes that this is something more supernatural than it is a regular person. But because he was basically killed and switched up, like tore up, bent up like that within her hands, and so many other cases were like this beforehand, uh, she became not arrested but detained, and she basically lost her position as a detective, and she had to go to court before, I guess, being arrested for her crimes that hasn't been proven, she hasn't been proven guilty for. Yeah, they basically were trying to say that she killed the boy, but she didn't. But she also had nobody with her, like Detective Diaz wasn't with her to prove that she didn't kill the boy. She broke protocol and took matters into her own hands. And that's when everyone was trying their best, especially uh, Detective McKinney was trying his best to get her arrested because her being fired wouldn't be enough. He starts to blame her for this guy's killing. I believe his name was Wayburn. And he was just throwing so much dirt on her. She had to take a drug test and she failed it because she ended up smoking the weed that her son had, that she collected from her son. And while she was there, she was basically during the court hearing, she was basically connecting everything together and starting to realize um how everything was beginning to tie together. This is also after the fact that her mom, Athena, had told her that she was adopted and things like that. So she was really, really deep into work and trying to figure out how to figure out who did this killing, because it was helping her get away from the fact that all of this going on in her personal life was going on. But now she's no longer able to be a detective, but because it's in her nature and that's how she got away from everything going on in her life, she couldn't help but to continue even while being detained. McKinney was just throwing so many things her way by trying to say that she was aggressive and all the things, basically saying everything that he was, and how she was a stalker after she caught him at this police hangout after hours where they would just be hanging out and stuff like that and just, doing their racist cop things. Once the word hits Kel, her son, uh, classmates, they start to basically tell all these things about and how he's the son of a pig, basically a police officer, and a murderer, a child murderer. He had no idea any of that had happened, so he was basically like confused because he didn't realize or know anything about that happening until he got to school. And the same day they had a dare event, I think it's drugs against resistance education or something like that. I probably just butchered that, but it's basically like an anti-drug campaign during the late 80s, early 90s. And the police officer that was there was basically already like attacking Kel by pointing him out and kept looking at him because he was already like approached by Detective McKinney for, having weed. And while Kel was there, he started to see and hear red-haired man. He was making him do and perform like certain actions during the program where it made it seem like he was high, even like during class. He ended up going home, and this is his first time getting to see his mom. And her and Athena was sitting at Athena and Kel were sitting at the lunch table together, and he was basically asking why she was being so mean to Athena. And that's when she broke the news to him that she was adopted this whole time. And Kel starts to say, like, basically, like, she can't be mean to the grandma and things like that because she's a killer, this and that. And he also had like a performance that night that he didn't want her at the school at all for, because he didn't want the attention to be on her. And she showed up anyway to the event. And Kel is a drummer, and while he was out there drumming, he noticed that she came in and she sat in the bleachers. And he started to immediately start to be impacted by that, and she was starting to throw him off, but he kind of got back to drumming. But then he started to see the red-haired man, and immediately I thought that people were going to be like, oh, he's just on drugs again. But the red-haired man started attacking him, and blood started to become like even visible on his band costume. So his mom ran out there and she basically protected him, things like that. And then later that night, he told her about the things that he saw, and he was wondering, like, was he crazy for seeing this crazy red-haired man? And that's when things started to become even more odd to her, and she realized that this is a more of a supernatural thing than it is a person, a physical person, going out and being a serial killer. I started to get very worried because I thought that Kel was gonna die, and I really didn't want him to die. But this is when Edmund, aka the red haired man, started to attack and kill everyone closest to Detective Reeves. He ends up killing Athena. He calls her over the phone and asks her to come to the toy shop where she works and where she used to work, and she was recently fired. He called her as her boss in the voice of her boss, asking her, could you please come to the shop? And she was like, who is this? And then he was like, come to the shop if you want to save your precious daughter. The reason why she was fired from this shop was because she didn't like the fact that they were selling Raggedy Ann dolls. And at the time, she was expressing that the reason why she didn't like the fact that she was selling Raggedy Ann dolls because it was very racist and very, you know, in comparison to the minstrel shows back in the day where white people would dress up as a black person and put these red bows in their hair and things like that to basically mock black people during slavery times and Jim Crow times and things like that. And it was really because the Raggedy Ann doll was Edmund's favorite toy to play with growing up. She didn't want, I believe she felt like his spirit was still lingering around. I don't know if she knew he was dead or not, but I feel like she genuinely believed that that would either remind her of him or would bring him up. And even before like he passed away, well, killed himself. After he killed Donovan, he immediately grabbed his Raggedy Ann doll and sat down in his love seat and was just rocking back and forth with the Raggedy Ann doll. And I didn't pick up on that in the beginning, but there were many scenes where he would go back and use the Raggedy Ann doll as a comfort mechanism. That ties in the fact that he's a red-haired man. He turned himself into a black Raggedy Ann. This is where he begins to try to attack Kel even more, although he does hold Kel hostage and makes Detective Reeves go and search for him. And he takes him and he puts him into their childhood home where they basically lived as they were, you know, before they were adopted and things like that. And this is when Detective Reeves starts to basically collect her memory of her childhood, which is what Edmund was doing all this time. Even through the victims, he was basically like making ways of like trying to connect it to where it told a story of their coming up as children. First, he killed their foster mother, and you know, she took care of them while they grew up. And that was the first case. Then he ended up killing a set of twins. They were twins when they were born. And then Benito, he had a brother that ended up being shipped back to his home country. So basically a brother that was gave away and forced out of the home, which represents him. And while she was going through the house for the second time, she noticed that a lot of the things that were damaged were either no longer there or they were repaired. And she started to tear back like the carpet because that's where she really realized that um something had happened there. Like that was one of the places where she was stuck when she first visited the home after the first case. She was really drawn to the closet until Detective Diaz asked her was she all right. And this closet was actually where the box took place, where they used to put the foster mother used to put them in growing up as a form of punishment. And she immediately started to recognize that and realize and connect parts of her childhood that she had kind of forgotten because I believe Athena made her forget that. And Edmund, aka the red-haired man, did a successful job at making her recollect her memories of everything that happened to them as they were children. Once they got to this point, she basically had to fight him off to get her child back. The way that she did this was by basically talking through the red-haired man and talking to Edmund. She talked to him and she let him know that she remembers everything, and she was just basically running down why he did all these things and how she didn't know this, and everything is just becoming like news to her. And in a way, I believe that healed Edmund's heart, and this ended up killing the demon red-haired man. The red-haired man basically disappeared, and Edmund was on the floor, twisted. That is the part where I'm kind of like confused, because although Edmund did sacrifice himself, why did his physical body show up again? And that's where I'm at a loss. I don't even really know what to say about that part. But if y'all have any thoughts, just let me know. And this is where she goes to her last court hearing, and she basically is able to prove that she wasn't the one doing these killings. I missed this step. It's a very vital source of information that I didn't mention, and I apologize for that. But so Detective Diaz, after Athena broke the news to Detective Reeves that she was twin siblings with Edmund, Detective Reeves immediately went to figure out where was Edmund. And that's when Detective Diaz told her he was already trying to tell her once at dinner that that was her twin sibling and that he had passed away. But he never got a chance to tell her that because she was so wrapped into the case. And she still wanted the files on him because she realized that he had showed up at her house, that was him. And she watched the film and things like that was at his house with Detective Diaz, things like that. I believe that he, in a way, knew where he feared that Detective Reeves would kind of like try to take that with her. So he had Detective McKinney on hand, and Detective Diaz wasn't expecting the clues to connect to the red-haired man, in that he had been trying to reach her for so long. So he had Detective McKinney on hand, like just in case she got out of hand. And as Detective McKinney does and has done in many cases, attacks Detective Reeves and gets very aggressive. While all this is going on, like, he admits to attacking the guy that was brutally beaten to death and a lot of other things. And she has this all on voice recording, and she shows this during the case, well, the court hearing, and she's basically proves that she's innocent and has him admitting that he done all those things. But she ended up having to kill him on the scene. But because she had all that on tape, and she basically was like doing self-defense, she's free. And the guy was like, after proving all of that and she was proven innocent, one of the lieutenants was like, he didn't want to offer her a detective job on hand, but she can work a desk office job and I guess like work her way up to the detective point. And that's when that's when the scene transitions to her basically saying F the police, and the song transitioning to NWA, F the police. And that's when we get back to not Athena, Detective Reeves back with her ex-husband Corey and her son Carol Reeves. They're all at home, being a family again. She's no longer a detective. She's enjoying her family and things like that. And she's sitting in her mother Athena's room, and she's just going through the jewelry box. And this is when the creepy top hat guy from season 1 shows up. He's singing to her, "What you gonna do? What you gonna do?" And the show ends. Now, this turned into more of a breakdown in me basically going through a whole timeline of things happened that I was trying to avoid to do, but that's just what I was led to do. That's just how things happen. But yeah, the show was very entertaining, and I can't wait for what the next season is going to look like, because I do not believe that they're going to leave us on that cliffhanger. There's definitely something else going to happen next season, but I'm wondering how are they going to connect it into, the next scene. Are they going to continue making it move on down timeline by making it based on the early 2000s, or what? Because initially I had no idea that season 1 and season 2 were connected, but luckily I ended up watching season 1 before season 2 anyway. Didn't know that the seasons were connected until Ruby Lee ended up showing up in the flashback, I think around episode 7 or 8, that she was their biological mother, Edmund and Dr. Reeves. And that was like a really, really crazy plot twist. But I don't really have anything else left to say other than like I'm really impressed at the performance of all the actors. But because I've been into Luke James like a lot lately, and also like a fun fact, one of my music theory teachers no, she wasn't my music theory teacher, she was my enjoyment of music teacher in college. She played the harp professionally for Luke James during his live album, and I think that was just really dope. And since she told us about him, like, I've been really into his music and into his catalog. I was already watching The Shy before I knew that information. But yeah, he's really dope. He's a really dope creative because he really does everything. And I hope that this role that he played and how great he played it shows the industry that he deserves all the accolades and awards, and also more opportunities to work. I guess I just want to end this video by saying Black horror is back, and it's something that I'm really grateful to be around to see, because I've always loved, horror movies, but them being mainly black casted is something that was always missing. When black people are in horror movies that aren't like really black casted, they just die out. I think this is really dope. And although it does like kind of stem with like, racism, it's something that we can't really get out of in Hollywood when it comes to like, the black stories and things like that. We can't really escape racism. We can never just be like superheroes and things like that without, race playing a factor in every film or role that takes place into, you know, any film that has like a lot of black people in it or like black leads. That's something that I wish would change, but in all honesty, as much as people try to say that race doesn't matter or doesn't play a factor, it plays a factor in everything that we do and everything that we're involved in. And it's just a reality that seems to can't even escape fiction. Although I do believe that everyone that worked on this film, well, not film, this series did a really great job at making it more than just about the race, making it more entertaining. Because when most of these shows that are or films that are based on, like, racist times, or like try to talk about how race plays a factor in black people and white people and things like that, they tend to harp on just that, but they don't show us anything outside of the obvious and what we already know, and already are experiencing. But I really feel like when black people do it and are involved in the projects, when it comes to things like this, it shows that they're able to show the racism from a more introspective way that makes it more creative and doesn't feel like we're being told the same story, aka lie, that we're told, that's very diluted. Well, it's not really a lie, it's the truth that's very diluted, like history lessons. Like I said in the beginning, although this like in season 1, like you could tell like most of the stuff is fiction, it still angers me because in a way that I could feel that a lot of these things were possible, but it just wasn't documented or taught to us in schools. But yeah, I'm gonna quit rambling and I'm gonna end the video here. Again, this was a very, very great watch. I haven't watched anything this good or had anything entertain me like this in a very long time. I've never not wanted to sit and binge watch a show like this. And it's mainly because I'm grateful for black lead shows like this, or mainly black casted shows like this. And I really, really hope that we receive more projects like this within the future. I'm definitely gonna go through the credits later on and try to go through everybody's, who all had a hand in this, because that's something I should have done before this video, but I didn't, and that's my bad. But I'm gonna end the video here. Thank you all for watching. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next review. Not sure what it's gonna be on, but hopefully something else catches my attention like this and makes me want to hop on camera to review and just give my thoughts on it. But yeah, thanks for watching.